Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you here. It's good to be at the church today. Welcome to those of you who are online. We're thrilled that you're here. I mentioned this earlier. The countdown clock had questions for the Bible. How'd y'all do? Pretty well? Good, good. I love the one about Jacob and Esau and what Jacob gave Esau. Did you see letter D? Chick-fil-A? That's pretty cute. That was wonderful. Thank you for finding that. That's a great thing. I'd like to start today like we started last week's sermon. I don't know if any of you remember this or not, but we started by bowing our heads, closing our eyes, and just thinking about the week that we've had and maybe some of the trials and troubles, maybe some of the good things, some of the bad things. Let's do that again. Close your eyes, bow your head. Do the same with us out there. We want to remember the things that we've struggled with this week. We want to remember the people with whom we've struggled. We want to think about the ways that we've hurt others and the ways that others have hurt us. We want to think about those that we know who are in need, who feel lost, who feel alone. We want to give thanks for those who have had good things happen in their week. Lord Jesus, we have carried so much into this room, and we've carried it with us all week, and much of it has been a burden on us. And we ask, Lord, that as we lay it upon you, that those burdens would become light, for you are carrying them with us and for us. You, as you stretched out your arms and laid the burdens of the whole world upon the wings of the cross. We ask, Lord, that you forgive us, and we ask, Lord, that you give us the will and the ability to forgive others and to ask for forgiveness from those that we may have hurt. For these and all things we come to you in prayer, O Lord our God, King of the universe. Amen. So it was, I think it was Thursday of this last week. It was either Thursday or Friday. I can't remember which. Both days I was heading up here early. And by early, I needed to get here by 8 o'clock. Because I had things going on, and so I got started just right around 7 o'clock, a couple minutes after. And as I always do, I drove out of the driveway, went down to 18th Street, and then over to what everybody knows as the Badger Blacktop. It's now called Paragon, but it's the Badger Blacktop. And there's a stop sign there, and I stop, and there's a bean field across the way, and of course a wide open space so that you can see the horizon. And above the horizon, and just a little after 7, is this bank of clouds, thin strip of clouds like this. And it was a really pretty blue. And then just above the clouds, there is this rather large, but very small, very, very narrow, excuse me. It was rather large, but very small, right? No, large but narrow red crescent that's sitting on top of the clouds. And, it looked like it didn't belong there. And it took me even just a second to realize that, hey, that's the sun. Because it wasn't on the horizon, it was sitting on this cloud, and it was so thin. Well, time goes on, and the crescent starts inching up and starts revealing more of itself. And you can see half of it, and it's gorgeous. And then finally, the whole fiery disk, this brilliant red-orange disk, is hanging above that thin strip of clouds. And the sky, it turned the entire eastern sky, various shades of red and orange and purple and the deepest of deep blues. It just didn't even look real. It was so stunning. And then as quickly as it rose, those well-defined edges of that disk started to get out of focus, and then they blurred all together. And all of those colors in the eastern sky dissipated as sunrise turned into morning. And all of this took place in less than 3 minutes. The whole business, and it's gone. It's there, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful beyond description, so beautiful it doesn't look real, and then it's gone. But it stuck with me all day long. In fact, it still sticks with me. I can still see it out there. If I had something bad going on in the day, I thought about that. If I had something I wasn't sure about, I had this picture of perfection right there in front of me. And I'm still thinking about it today, talking to you about it, because it made such an impression. Okay, hold that thought. I'd like to move into the sermon series now, and we've got a 2-week series, and then we have something really special coming after that. But if you've seen that graphic before, this graphic right up here, if it looks familiar, it's because it is familiar. I did this about 1.5 years ago. Did a sort of question and answer thing. Do some of you remember that? Where I had you put questions in a basket, and then I took the basket and like right in front of you just pulled the questions out and answered them. Not that I'm that good, but I'm really good at bluffing. And that's what I did. I mean, I did the best I could. But then I also had a couple of Sundays where I just took on a question that I knew was out there or something I couldn't get to that day. So the question and answer thing is going to come next week. And we'll have the box out there. I'd like you to write questions down. I'd like you to put them in the box. If you're watching online, we'll give you a phone number next week or some way for you to message in. And we'll get the questions up here. And listen, folks, the sermon is only going to be as long as the questions I have, all right? So if you give me like one question, it's going to be a 2-minute sermon. So be thinking this week about what you might want to ask and things that are on your mind. And let's see how we do. So, but for this week, I'm going to take on something that I know a lot of people have been asking because I've been getting the question more than regularly lately. And some folks have called in, some folks have texted, I've gotten emails, some folks have come in and sat in my office, and they're all asking the same basic question. They're watching the world that we know, it's just sort of burning right now. I mean, there's so much divisiveness. You watch the news, and it's news item after news item after news item. And the story is always, we are not unified. We are not one. And not just that we have a disagreement, but the disagreements are so profound that they've become dividing points against us. And I mean, it's literally everything from soup to nuts. Right? It's, do you mask or do you not mask? Something as simple as that. But, you know, you get with the wrong crowds or the right crowds, whatever the case may be, and those are fighting words, right? You've seen it. You've heard it. There are the racial tensions that are going on. There's Freddie Gray. There's cops being shot. There's Republicans and Democrats. That's always the case. As if that isn't enough, we've got all this other stuff with us. There's everything else under the sun, and right now it is take no prisoners. And you all know it. You've all seen it. You've felt it. And frankly, more than likely, it's also come into your homes. Because I'm going to guess that for most of you, present company included, we like to watch the news that we agree with. Fair to say? I won't have you raise hands, Fox News versus CNN or MSNBC, I don't care. But you watch the one you agree with, right? Because, you know, frankly, let's just call it what it is. News isn't news anymore. News is opinion. News is hearing what a group of people want to hear. And that's what it's become. And I've thought about all of that. And I've wondered about it. Because, you know, what I've seen is that people have become not just intolerant of opinions, but they become intolerant of other people that they don't agree with. I mean, I have heard in this building people who are of a liberal political bent say, I have no idea how someone who is conservative could also call themselves Christian because they're not. And I have heard in this building someone come to me and say, I have no idea how a conservative could call themselves a Christian because they are incompatible. Same building. You folks in the community. And I wonder about that. I mean, the opinions that a person holds has become more important than the person who holds the opinion. Let me say that again. The opinion that someone holds has become more important than the person. Have you all felt that? Have you all seen it? It's absolutely true. And it's become our reality. It's become the world as we know it, and everyone is beginning to take it as gospel. Nobody likes it, but it's all there. And so you have come to me, some of you, many of you, and you've said, Pastor, I don't like what's going on. Could you help me understand this in terms of the faith? You ready for an answer? Let's wait for a song.
This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and rounds me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest in all the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, his hand the wonders wrought.
Let's show our appreciation for Adam and his music this morning. Man, that's just fantastic. And you know, we've been conducting more informal worship here on Sunday mornings lately, mainly because at first we were just on live stream, and now you folks are here. But it's been really an opportunity to explore some new things. It's informal worship, but you notice Adam today is singing very traditional hymns. And so we're trying to catch everybody. Just stay with us. If there's something that doesn't work for you, wait a week. You got stuff like this, and that works for a segment of people as well. And most of all, here's the thing, folks. I'll just tell you that the formal worship that we were doing doesn't work for a lot of people, especially people who have never been a part of the faith, or they've fallen away from the faith. Very often they've fallen away from the faith because they go to church and everything is just wooden and hard, and you do it the same way every week, and it maybe has meaning to us who have been in here for a long time, but it doesn't have any meaning to them, so they check out. So I think moving in this direction, more informal, with stuff like this, songs like this, music like this, I really hope that's a direction we can take with this worship service. And if not, we'll just go to 2 worship services sometime. And the tech team is shaking in their boots because they have to be here 2 hours rather than 1. So let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, the answer. I don't have it. Okay, but I do have something from the Apostle Paul, and it was the lesson that Shelley read. Thank you very much. Let me tell you a little bit, give you a little bit of background about this lesson. Paul is writing to the Christian church in a place called Corinth. Corinth is in Greece. It's a port city. It's a cosmopolitan city. And there has been a Christian church established there. And this church, like our society today, is on fire. And not in a good way. Not fire as in fire of the Holy Spirit, but fire as in it's divisive. And Paul got caught in that. So you've got this faction versus this faction versus this faction versus this faction. And then Paul got involved, and Paul's on the outs with most everybody there. And he's sort of the one who's in charge of the church. He goes from place to place, and he's sort of like a bishop. He visits every place. By the way, that's what a bishop is. A bishop is a visitor. He's not an overseer. He's a visitor. He's someone who comes in and brings the gospel. So Paul is on the outs as well, and it's so bad that he doesn't feel like he can go back to Corinth. He wrote 1 Corinthians, and then things got worse, and then he wrote, between 1 and 2 Corinthians, he wrote another letter because he didn't feel like he could go because things were so bad, and he was so much on the outs with so much of the congregation. We don't have that letter. It's referred to in the scriptures, but we don't know what it has. Maybe someday we will, and it'd be very interesting because it would fill in a lot of the pieces. But we do know this, that the letter troubled Paul after he sent it because, he just unloaded both barrels on him. And, he said, you guys got to straighten up. He just let them have it in terms of this divisiveness. And after he sent it, he had sender's regret. Y'all know what that is? Wish he wouldn't have sent it. And so he's very worried about this. He literally goes around Asia Minor trying to catch up with Titus, the guy who took the letter to Corinth, to find out what happened. Well, miracle of all miracles, the letter was delivered, and we don't know for sure. Either the letter made a difference or something changed with the people, and they began to soften. And the healing of those divisive spirits were starting to go away. And then Paul writes 2 Corinthians, and the passage we have today. And what he's talking about in that passage, it is, I think it's one of the most beautiful chapters that Paul has written. The 4th chapter of 2 Corinthians. Read it. Read the whole thing. Because Paul's talking about the reality we see. And for the church in Corinth, it was a reality of divisiveness. It was a reality of factions and backbiting and one hurting the other and one hating the other and this opinion and that opinion, and the opinions are more important than the people who hold the opinions. And that was what everyone saw, and they just accepted that as reality because that's what they can see, that's what they can hear, taste, touch, smell, the whole business. And Paul says, don't be deceived. These present troubles are momentary, and they will dissolve away into nothing. There is something you can't see, Paul says, and that is a reality that will last forever. Early in the chapter, he talks about being a clay jar. And that clay jar is messy, and that clay jar is broken, but it's what everybody sees. And then he says, hidden inside, invisible from sight, inside that broken, messy, human jar, physical jar, is this jewel within. What's on the outside looks real because you can see it. It's only here for a short time. What's inside is true and eternal. I thought about that when I thought about Jesus on the cross. So he's hanging there on the cross, and that is the clay jar. And he is suffering, and he's dying, and he's doing so at the hands of people who hate him, and they revile him, and they scorn him, and they mock him. And those are the temporary things that at that moment look so real. And then he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And there's the jewel. And then he gives up his spirit, and at that moment creates an eternity for all of us. And those are the unseen things that last forever. There's the clay pot, and there's jewel within. One is seen, one cannot be seen. One is temporary, although it looks real. The other is hidden, and it is eternal. I think about these things as I think about so much of our world. The suffering that we've gone through, the hurt, the trial, the trouble, the sinfulness. All of those things are clay jars. They're just what you see on the outside. But on the inside is something greater and wider and deeper than anything you and I can imagine. It is a shining jewel, and it's unseen, and it's hidden. And every once in a while, we get a glimpse. We get a 3-minute snapshot of a perfect sunrise. That sunrise called Jesus Christ. And it changes the world as we see it. Because what we see with our eyes is not real. The reality is the sunrise. The reality is the vision of something that sustains us to everything in this life that looks so real. Let's sing.
This is my Father's world, the birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world, He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I hear Him pass. He speaks to me everywhere.
Can you sing all the time? Of course, I say that every week because we've got such great singers here. Thank you so much, Adam. That was amazing, and music moves the heart, stirs the heart, and so thank you. So all of this reminded me of something I saw a couple of months ago. Actually, I didn't see it, I heard it. It was a podcast on NPR. I think the podcast was called Rough Translation, and it was an episode called Hotel Corona. It's a story took place at the very beginning of the year, and COVID has started heating up in Israel. And so people are, they're doing the full Monty on this thing. They're wearing the face masks. They're actually cloistered inside because they're not supposed to go out. In fact, on Passover, they had police and military at checkpoints because they didn't want folks moving from house to house. Because during Passover, that's what you do. You go to people's homes, and they didn't want that happening. So they were a total lockdown, right? Social distancing, the whole 9 yards. And then also, the government leased out something called the Hotel Dan, a 9-story hotel that's in downtown Jerusalem. They did this not just in Jerusalem, but all over the country, but the Dan is where we want to be. And they used the hotel as a place for people who have the virus to go and stay until they are no longer contagious. And so there are about 180 people that are staying in this hotel. And let me tell you something, a little something about Jewish society, or not Jewish, Israeli society, because it's not just Jewish. And that's the thing, as you all know, because you watch the news, right? You've seen what happens in the Middle East. There is all kinds of segregation. And it's not just separate. It is separate because people can't be with each other, all right? So you've got Israelis, Jews, and you've got Palestinians and Arabs, Muslims. And then within the Jews, you have all these different sects. You have the secular Jews, You have you have the Reformed Jews, you have the conservative Jews, you have the Orthodox Jews, you have the ultra-Orthodox Jews, and probably 4 or 5 others that I'm not thinking of. And so you have all these dividing lines, and everybody is separate. And in fact, when it comes to Palestinians and Israelis, they don't even live in the same towns, and their children don't even go to the same schools. And the only place they might mix is at a marketplace. But that's the only place they mix. They do not do things socially together. They do not want to be with each other because the place is a powder keg. And you just remain separate. You remain with your own kind. Of course, coronavirus doesn't care if you're Israeli or Palestinian or Arab. And it doesn't care if you're ultra-Orthodox or secular or anything else in between. It just hits. And so 180 or so victims of coronavirus are in this hotel. And it is across the spectrum of all the various groups. They're all represented in this hotel. And they are locked in with each other, including a woman by the name of Aisha, who is a Bedouin Muslim. And she gets there, and the very first day she gets there, she goes into the dining hall, and she looks around for a place to sit. She has her tray, and she looks around, and she sees that everyone has taken from the real world out there and brought it in here. They're all sitting with their own kinds. And something told her, nah, I don't think so. And so she started looking around, and she spotted this couple. It's a Jewish couple, and they were conservative. You can tell by the way they were dressed or what they had on their heads. And they were laughing, and even one of them caught her eye, and she said, I'm going there. And she sat down. And they had this conversation, and the conversation was so easy. Now, mind you, this never happens in Israel. A Muslim and a Jew sitting down, breaking bread together, and talking. By the end of the meal, they are laughing and they are singing songs together, the 3 of them at this table. They're probably the last people to leave because they're enjoying the conversation and the fun so much. So the next morning, Aisha goes into the dining hall and she notices something different. Oh, one more thing. I forgot this. This is important. She was having so much fun, she took out her phone and did a video and posted it on Instagram. That's important. So next morning she gets there and she notices that things are different. Nobody's sitting with their own kind. They're all mixed and matched, and they're talking to each other, and the conversation is lively. And some of the conversation is frank, like to a Palestinian, do you consider yourself to be Israeli or Palestinian? Those are fighting words, right? But in this context, it felt more inviting. It felt like, I just want to know. And they would ask each other religious questions like, why do you do this as a Jew, or why do you do this as a Muslim? Things that they've never asked, they don't know because they've never asked, because they don't talk to each other. And they had these wonderful conversations. And then they start doing Zumba together. And they listen to a comedian who has the virus, and they're up on the roof doing yoga and cutting hair and everything else, and they're high-fiving and they're hugging each other. And they're taking videos, and they're putting them on Instagram. And something happens. The videos all go viral in Israel. People are going nuts over this thing because they're saying, how is this? Someone wearing a ajib, I think that's called, the Muslim headdress for women, and someone with a yarmulke. They're hugging each other. They're talking to each other. How can that be? I mean, can they really be getting along this well? How long can that possibly last? And I mean, the country is taken by storm. It is like a reality television show. And in fact, some of the TV stations pick it up and they broadcast it. Israel's watching. They're watching the whole business. And it's so different than what they've known and experienced. I wish I had time to tell you about the Passover. But suffice it to say that the Passover meal was in a single room, divided by a barrier so that the ultra-Orthodox could observe in their own way without cameras. And suffice it to say that what happens here is nothing short of spectacular. The barrier is pushed aside by, guess who? The ultra-Orthodox. And they're sitting in the same room, and they've invited all the Muslims to come and observe Passover with them. And by the last day of Passover, Aisha has been invited to sit at the table of a group of ultra-Orthodox Jews. Incredible. Unbelievable. Perfect. Of course, you can't stay in a coronavirus hotel forever, and eventually everybody gets better, and they have to go back out into the real world, where there is all this segregation and all this animosity and all this tension and sticking with your own kind. And a couple of things occur to me. The first thing is this. It took a disease to bring people who are of different kinds and are segregated together. I'd like you to hold on to that thought. I'm not going to talk about that much today, but I just find that really interesting, that it takes something that is set against us to bring us together. We'll talk about that one another time. The second observation is this. What's reality? Because if you were to ask most people, they would say that, well, reality is what happens out in the real world. The segregation, the division, the animosity, because that's what everybody sees, that's what everybody knows, that's what everyone expects. The differences between Jews and Muslims, between all the factions within and different range of spectrums within the Jewish circles. That's reality. That's what everybody would see, because that's what you see, that's what you know. That's the world, right? Is it that? Or is it a sunrise that comes up, is here for a moment, and is gone? And it's so perfect that it doesn't look real. And that sunrise becomes, for at least a few people in Israel, a hope and a promise and a vision that the world as we see it, these present troubles will only last a moment, and that all of this will go away to something that lasts forever. And that thing that will last forever, we saw it in a 3-minute picture in the Hotel Corona. Now, if that can be true for Israel, couldn't it also be true for us and the current state that we're in? I mean, you've heard me say this before, and it's not my idea originally, it's somebody else's, but I believe that the only remedy for the divisiveness that we are currently experiencing is a revival of the Christian faith throughout the entire country. And it starts here with us. I believe that with all my heart. Because that divisiveness has become our reality. That sense that the opinion a person holds is more important than the person himself has become gospel truth in our world. And how do you change that? You put it in the lap of Jesus. And you ask him to come into your heart. And so, my friends, consider this possibility. That instead of seeing someone who does not share your opinion as an adversary, listen to them. Hear what they have to say, and don't just let it go over the top, or don't be shouting past each other, but just listen. Listen to what they have to say. Let it sink into your heart. Because what they're doing is they're emptying their heart on you. Give them the safety and the space to make that happen. Care for them. You don't have to agree with them. Care for them. Love them. See them not as an opinion, but as another human being. Because all that we have been experiencing here in our country in the last couple of years, it's temporary. It's a present trouble, and it will not last forever. It is a clay jar, and hidden inside each one of you is a jewel. A man who loves you so much that he gave up his clay jar so that you might know the hidden things and the eternal truth of God's forgiveness and eternal life. Listen to them. Hear their heart. Love them for who they are, and the world will begin to change. Thanks be to God. Amen.